Simon. And there's a room named Simon outside as well. So many thanks, Simon. I think there's going to be a healthy discussion, hopefully, after I finish in the discussion panel side of things. First of all, I'm delighted that Wiley is part of this inaugural Society Street conference. Given the impact of, well, the degree of that we have to do with the society world in general, I can't really imagine it any other way, but I'm very glad that we're here and that we're taking part as well. Bit of background about me. I'm a bit of a transplanted Englishman. I actually live in the States and have done for the last dozen years, but just this morning I've had chats with people I've known from before I moved over, so it's nice to see some familiar faces in the audience as well. I look after two things at Wiley. I look after our society services business, and bless you, and I also look after our sales organization as well. So really that encapsulates all of those external relationships, the customers that we have, the partners that we have, the way that we interact with them as well. And so far, really, we've had an excellent morning this morning in terms of presentations, and I'm very flattered that Simon and Sam asked me to speak today. I'm going to probably be looking down, or I tend to walk and talk, but I've got a lot of notes, and I want to make sure I don't miss anything out. So I'll be a static target as opposed to a moving one over the next few minutes. There are various revenue streams that you as societies rely on in order to fund your mission on behalf of your membership. Publishing, whether books or more frequently journals programs, is obviously normally one of the major streams, and we've just heard Simon really talk about this. And I'm sure Tasha will address this a little bit later on, but as has already been said, those revenue streams are really undergoing some material change, and that change is accelerating. It's only going in one direction. So what I'm going to do for the next 15, 20 minutes or so is talk about some of those changes in the world of research communication, the impacts they're having on Wiley, and the impacts that we believe they're going to have on societies in general. I'll talk a bit about our guiding principles at Wiley for charting our future. I'll talk about our playbook for managing through those changes, and I'll end with a couple of observations at the end about how we see our role now as a society publisher and also going into the future as well. So let's start off with the market environment in which we're living. I could have put a very long list of things on there, but I wanted to home in on some big specific things. There are these winds of change that are blowing. The role of government in research is changing. The role of private funders in research is changing. We're seeing this massive change in scientific dissemination, the outputs, disruptive technologies, and the challenges of building a more inclusive research community as well. And we're seeing increasing questions, especially here in Europe, in the UK and the rest of Europe, about the role of a publisher, about the value proposition that's really meant by being a publisher. What do we really add to the mix? I'll also be talking a bit about China as we go forward as well, and also about the open access landscape, which seems to be just completely pervasive, both stateside as well now over the last few weeks and months as well. So I'll go and talk a bit about those three areas. First of all, talking about the researchers themselves. Last Friday, I was in DC, and Wiley hosted one of our four big executive seminars for societies that we do: North America, Asia Pac, Australia, and also, of course, here in Europe as well. And we touched on some key developing trends that were really identified by our society partners, including various technology ones, AI, blockchain, other emergent technologies. And these technologies are really enabling research in lots of different ways. But the point is, that I really want to emphasize here, is that the technologies that researchers are adopting aren't driving that behavior change. Their behavior change is driving the types of technologies that they're adopting. And that behavior change that we're seeing with researchers and their community is pretty radical. So we all need to be very acutely aware of that. For researchers today, a lot of their outputs are around the data they're producing, and not just the articles that they're writing, the actual words. And we operate entirely at the point of research process where researchers want to communicate the results of what they're discovering. And again, it's not just the written word, it's the data they're talking about. They're working in open source computer programs, Python, R, exploding right now, sharing their data, their code. Jupyter notebooks are making it much easier to do that integration as well. And that's absolutely as much a form of output as the research article used to be as well. Just last week, I was having dinner with the chairman of a company called CodeOcean, and that's really a platform for reproducible computational research, and that's the area where really exciting things are happening right now. I'd also add probably more so in the STM disciplines, but it's going to spread in social sciences, humanities as well, I'm sure, over the coming months and years. Preprint servers are booming. Researchers are writing up their results, sharing them on preprint servers before they publish an article. Preprints are increasingly being seen as a valid form of research communication in their own right. Researchers are getting fed up that they can't share their 3D images and their models easily through a published journal, and they're calling out the scientific article as antiquated and less useful in today's world. So we're in the midst of this scientific revolution that's been kind of 20, 30 years in the making, but we're right in the middle of it right now, and we have to listen to our researchers to really understand what's happening, what's going on, and where we're heading. And we have to listen to people like Athi Jayaraman, and she's an associate professor of biomolecular engineering. And in her lab, they're generating terabytes on terabytes of data, and she believes it's the responsibility of the author to link that data to the published example, to let people know exactly how the final chart or graph made it into the journal, and why that data instead of the other data that we have. And she wants all journals to really require their authors to make their raw data available as a condition of publication. And she wants it available to the machine learning community and to other scientists in her field and in related fields. She was a speaker at the STM conference in the States a few weeks ago. And she made one quote that I thought, yeah, that's worth writing down and remembering. She said, please don't encourage data sharing. Enforce data sharing. And that's this sort of mandate that I think we need to start thinking about as well. And right now, we really do very little of either. There are various other examples. I'll just go to one or two of the ones that I have here in given time constraints. But there's a guy called Jim English, who is well named. He's an English professor at the Price Lab for Digital Humanities at the University of Pennsylvania in the States. And he talks about articles minus, where essentially it's a write-up of the data and what the data is and what the scholars may be interested in using in that particular data set. There's no article. It's just a description of the data. So we have to move faster as a community, and I'm thinking about all of societies in that sense, because taking all of that together with the volumes of research that we've done on author and researcher behavior as Wiley, and the observations of our publishing teams out in the field, here's what we're concluding. Researchers are sharing the results of their research in ways that extend significantly beyond the published article. And that's putting pressure on the value of articles and journals. And this comes back a bit to what Simon started talking about as well. Okay, my favorite topic, open access. We have to move faster because governments and institutions are changing their role in the scholarly communication landscape, and at times pretty dramatically. Germany is a great example. In Germany, as many of you will be aware, there's an initiative underway called Project Deal, D-E-A-L, capitals, and the intent is to essentially create a nationwide licensing agreement for the entire portfolio of electronic journals, with a key open access component as well. And the intent is, as we are all, again, acutely aware, to bring a real change to the status quo in negotiations for consent and pricing. And the effects of a consortium agreement on that national level should relieve the financial burden on individual institutions and should hopefully bring wide-scale, lasting improvements. to scholarly literature for academics. And the way the Times Higher Education, THE, described this was in a worldwide campaign to shift academic publishing to open access, the Germans are fighting a major battle. To many, they look like heroes. And I'm not actually going to deny that in many ways they are, but it's a very nuanced argument, and I hope that we get the chance to talk more about this as we go through the discussion panel as well. This is one of a number of read and publish deals that are coming out of Europe. And VSNU was probably the first one coming out of the Netherlands. These are really being seen as a game changer for national consortia deals and the way those negotiations work. Last week, the Scholarly Kitchen, which some of you, are any of you aware? Hands up people who know the Scholarly Kitchen. Okay, good. I actually had an email from Roger Schonfeld while one of the morning sessions was going on, asking for some feedback and some thoughts. So I think they've got their finger firmly on the pulse of what's happening in this market right now. And one of the things that they said last week, first of all, they're looking for various kinds of open access, big deals, flipping from a pay-to-read model on an increasingly pay-to-publish model. Secondly, they're looking at national-level consortia, and as with Germany's deal, claim to speak with a single voice for the entire university sector in a given country. And third, they're taking a much stronger, in fact, that's my words, but they're taking a stronger negotiating posture than we've seen before, driven in part by a strong negotiating approach, for which Germany is widely regarded, and its ability to capture the attention of university presidents, who in turn provide that degree of political control and influence. So this is going to change our publishing models pretty dramatically. Stateside, we're starting to see the first seeds of this change as well. Many of you may have read about the MIT deal with the RSC, and I think we've got a colleague from the RSC in the room as well right now. And that's a very interesting development just in the last week or so in terms of pilot scheme to look at open access as well. While I was at the exec seminar in DC last Friday, there was an announcement that came out from CDL, the California Digital Library, representing many of the schools in California, which is basically saying we are firmly behind open access. This is really where we see a large part of our future as well. This is becoming a global phenomenon. China. Let's talk about China. So China has already surpassed, and I find this hard to sort of think about, but it's true, the US as the #1 output research provider on a global basis. They're already the biggest. I think they're very shortly going to surpass the US as the biggest spender on research and development as well. So this train has left the station, is going at a rapid speed already. They've also just recently restructured their main science funding agencies, and they've reconfigured the Ministry of Science and Technology so it takes on new responsibilities in funding and in researcher recruitment. They're looking at how they're going to build that infrastructure in the coming years. And they've also introduced new rules around scientific data sharing, including a national scientific data center. Again, this will be very interesting seeing how this develops. We've seen announcements, we've seen proclamations. We haven't seen much detail from the Chinese yet in terms of what these infrastructures are going to look like. But it's also worth mentioning that China's also signed up to the OA 2020 initiative, the global alliance really aimed at pushing that transition towards open access for a large part of research output. So American research, frankly, the whole of the rest of the world's research can't ignore those major changes coming out of China. Certainly as far as Wiley is concerned, we're doubling down in our investment in that market. And interestingly enough, we're also partnering with various societies. First and foremost, the AGU, which I think Lynn mentioned a bit earlier on this morning in terms of what we're doing to collaborate in helping the society in that market, how it builds its brand, how it really builds its footprint there as well. Okay, good old Winston Churchill quote. So our guiding principle as Wiley, I think right now, is to organize ourselves. Thinking about our products, about our strategic planning, all of our activities really, around one sort of real North Star. And that is the researcher, him or herself. And really everything we're doing now is really geared towards how does this support the needs of that researcher? And that includes all of the publication activity we're involved in, but increasingly I think we'll look to support the researcher in a variety of ways, to help them communicate their science and their scholarship to the right audience in the most meaningful and effective and impactful way possible. And that's not going to happen overnight, and we're going to need to continue to reinforce these strategies, I think, for the long term. So that's really going to be the key focus. I'm almost probably out of time right now, but I want to speak about a couple of other things before I close. One of the best things about working with Wiley is we've been around for about 211 years. So we know what we're doing, and we've got a good track record, and that allows us to build up a degree of trust, obviously, with our long-term partners, many of whom are societies. But it also means that because of our company structure, we don't have this quarter to quarter clock ticking. We have a luxury of taking a longer view and planning for that longer view and that long-term perspective. Very much the Chinese actually do as well. And so these are the three main areas that we're focusing in on. Evolving our business that we have currently, and you'll see us continuing to innovate around journals publishing. But that won't be enough. And I think that we're really going to be looking at our adjacent opportunities as well, and the routes that we have into our library community. We're already starting to build out different types of products and solutions for that community. And the one plug I'll give right now is one product called Wiley Digital Archives, WDA. And we've got two of the first modules that came out. One was with NIAS, the New York Academy of Sciences, and the other close to home here, the Royal Anthropological Institute of Great Britain and Ireland. And what we're doing is looking at the core collections that they've built up themselves over the decades, or in some cases centuries, and digitizing those. And it's in many cases ephemera or records. The store is incredibly rich of content, and we're looking at providing those to libraries on a subscription or a purchase basis. And then after a short period of time, we're going to be making those again freely available to the community at large. Once we've had our opportunity to monetize it, create some revenues for the society in question, and then basically make it freely available as well. That's one of the things that we're doing. We're also investing in potential disruptors, like preprints, as I mentioned earlier. The ESAW initiative, Earth and Space Sciences, Open Archives with the AGU, is one good example of just exploring preprints and how we can really help, again, serve speed and scale of dissemination as rapidly as possible before you get to the definitive article of record as well. So we'll be evolving our core. We'll be leveraging those adjacencies and disrupting ourselves, hopefully, because that's really, if we're not doing that, we've got a big problem. And those are the sort of strategies we'll be employing, and hopefully we can successfully employ some of those strategies together. And I don't know what that combination is going to look like in 10 years. I don't know what it's going to look like in 5 years. But I believe that it's going to be much better if we're collaborating when we're really looking at those opportunities. So, last of all, Wiley we're very fortunate to be the world's leading society publisher. And we're committed to a world in which both knowledge and societies flourish. In fact, probably where knowledge flourishes because societies flourish. And we view it as our mission to provide dedicated specialist advice and expertise to our society partners. And we're very grateful for the opportunity to work alongside you to solve not only the market challenges that we're facing, but the global challenges that the world is facing. So with that, thanks very much for your time, and I look forward to the panel discussion. Thanks.
Thank you, Simon.